I'm often asked, how often do I sharpen? Well, you can feel the plane start to drag. It's not cutting as cleanly as it was. And look at these shavings. They're all sorts of little pieces. They're little parts of a shaving rather than one nice complete shaving. That's a good indication that there's little nicks in the blade that are severing your shaving. So my sequence starts often at the grinder. When I need to, I grind a hollow grind in my blades, and then I move on to diamond stones with oil and various Sharpening stones to hone the blade to a higher and higher polish. And on my very, very best blades where I want to have the sharpest edge, I use 1 micron diamond paste on a piece of cherry. Where do I start my sharpening sequence has a lot to do with how dull the tool is. If it's quite dull, I'll go to the diamond stone, 600, 1200 grit, and try and create a new geometry, a new cutting edge very rapidly, and then the honing is much faster. Or I could go to the 2000 stone, but probably have to hone much longer to do the same amount of effective work. You'll notice I have a hollow grind on my bevel. I do that because it makes sharpening much faster. Because then I'm taking steel away from the edge, which is what I want, and the heel, which just gives me the balance or the orientation on the stone. I create this hollow grind at the grinder, and I only grind maybe once every 5 or 6 sharpenings. When the hollow grind in my bevel starts to get smaller, I'll take it to the grinder and renew it. I've got a homemade jig that I built, and a standard grinder. The wheel is slightly crowned, and I set it up very carefully so that the wheel is hitting at the center of the hollow grind that I want to make. Keep the blade engaged with the wheel and go back and forth, never taking it off the wheel. I also never get it so hot that I can't touch it comfortably with my hands. I've got my iron ground and I'm ready to start doing some honing. I like to start on a fairly coarse stone. This is a 600 grit diamond. I believe that getting a brand new edge rapidly with a coarse stone is the fastest way to sharpen rather than spend a longer time, let's say, at a 2000 grit stone. I like to use a little kerosene and a little oil for my lubricant. I'll just engage it with the stone. My arm is part of the mechanism holding the blade at the right angle. I can feel the bevel. And I work freehand. I just find it's faster. And just be relaxed. Doesn't take a lot of pressure. Keep going until I can feel a little wire edge forming on the back side. The wire edge means to me that I've actually cut through on the bevel to the back side or the back, and I've created a brand new edge. If you don't have a little wire edge, then you don't really have a brand new edge. After I'm finished with each stone, I'm careful to wipe down the stone and my plane iron so I don't cross-contaminate with coarse grit into my next finer stone. I use a Corian block on my bench to protect it, and then a non-slip pad to hold the stones. I started with a 600 grit diamond. After that I go to a 2000 grit Sharpening waterstone, then a 5000 grit Sharpening waterstone, and finally an 8000 grit Sharpening waterstone where I do the back and the bevel. That's the only stone that touches the back of my plane iron. The bevel on a lot of irons today, which are so thick, is quite wide, and it's quite easy to find that bevel on the stone. And I just orient it to that bevel, hone, and then occasionally reorient myself to check that I'm in the right bevel. I know I'm on the right bevel angle when I'm seeing water pushed ahead of me as I'm sharpening. It's very important when you're doing the back that it's well supported on the stone, so you have no chance of lifting up the blade or lowering the blade and rounding the edge. Let me show you a nice trick for really getting an incredible edge. When you're up against very difficult woods, let's say figured or somehow challenging, what I use is diamond paste, 1 micron diamond paste on a block of nice fine-grained cherry. Maple would work, birch would work, but a fine-grained wood, not oak or something like that. Put a small squirt on the wood and then use it exactly the way you would a sharpening stone. Work the back, work all along the curvature of the cambered edge, and really what you're doing is essentially stropping it, but it takes it up to somewhere around 12 or 14,000 grit and makes a noticeable difference in the longevity of the edge and the quality of the cut. The polish on the back also goes up one more notch. I like to sharpen freehand. I find it's faster, especially when you get to cambering the iron. It's easier to manipulate it on the stone. But some people like a jig. Jigs do have usefulness, training wheels to get you oriented to the right angle. That should work. And then another thing about them is you've got to be sure to see they maintain a very nice consistent angle. Even some jigs can change for a slight micro bevel. But you should be moving your stone back and forth so that you use all of your stone and wear it evenly. An often overlooked aspect of sharpening is your stones must be flat. For the most efficient sharpening, they must be flat. I'm going to show you how to flatten, how I flatten my stones. I use a coarse diamond plate. Apply enough moisture. Bring the stones together. Rub with modest pressure and reverse them occasionally. You know when you're flat, when the color of the stone comes up consistent, clean.